The 2024 BRICS Summit will take place in Kazan, Russia from October 22nd to 24th. With its recent expansion from 5 to 10 member countries, BRICS is poised for greater cooperation and success across economic, political, and cultural spheres. The media continues to serve as a vital bridge fostering connections and mutual understanding among the member states. And for an in-depth look at the forum, China Global Television Network initiated the media dialogue where journalists from CGTN and BRICS Africa TV share their views on BRICS cooperation, the bloc's expansion and future prospects. We're now pleased to be joined by Mr. Peter Ndoro, anchor from BRICS Africa TV. Welcome to our program, Peter.
Lovely to be here. Thanks so much indeed. I look forward to our conversation, Chuyuan.
So let's get started. As South Africa prepares to engage in the forthcoming BRICS meeting, what does South Africa see as the most critical issues on the agenda? How do these issues intersect with South Africa's strategic interests, and how might the country leverage its position within BRICS to address these pressing matters?
All right, I think there are probably three areas that are very pressing for South Africa as a country. Economic cooperation, global governance reform, as well as sustainable development. Those will be big on our agenda, certainly going forward. I think economic cooperation has always been something that's been important to South Africa, and China being our biggest trading partner continues to be a big thing for us, and including these other countries. And I think given the challenges that we've had with the global system, finding economic relations within the BRICS grouping, particularly given if we think about just how big that grouping is in terms of the global GDP, to be in that family for South Africa can only be a great benefit, and to have less dependence perhaps on the Western outlook is going to be key for South Africa, and also maintaining those relationships. And we talk about global governance reform. Well, I think it's a given that most developing nations are not happy with the way that, for example, the United Nations is set up. It tends to give particularly Africa less of a voice, 54 nations, and yet only now is there consideration for the continent in its totality to have one seat on the Security Council. That's hardly adequate, I think, for us as a continent. And also just the way that Africa is dependent on a lot of the systems that have been developed by the West makes us overly and unfairly dependent on how they measure things, rather than perhaps the truth that we see on our continent and the potential that we have. So reform there, absolutely essential. And of course, sustainable development. I think it's on the agenda for everybody, particularly in Africa, where we, in particular, suffer greatly in terms of the effects of climate change, and yet we're the least emitters. So for reform and sustainability to take place, there must be a fair and just way. And so South Africa will be looking for help and assistance, and particularly with countries like China, who have been leading in the way of moving and converting to more sustainable and green areas. So that's going to be key for us. And I think those tie in with South Africa's strategic objectives. I wonder, though, when I look at China, China's been a driving force behind BRICS's mission, particularly in areas like infrastructure development, trade, and technology. And as we look towards this upcoming BRICS Summit, I just wonder how China sees its role in advancing key global issues like climate change, global inequality, and economic recovery within the BRICS framework.
Well, I think China is expected to focus on several key priorities that align with its own vision for global progress. First, infrastructure development, I think, will be at the top of the list. But China has already shown its commitment to enhancing connectivity and fostering economic ties across the bloc through initiatives like the Belt and Road. Now, the plan is to keep that momentum going with a sharp focus on sustainable and inclusive infrastructure projects that can really jack up the quality of life and open up new economic horizons for BRICS nations. For example, investing in railways and ports on the African continent isn't just about fixing the basic, it's about carving out new trade routes that can supercharge the economy across the continent. Another key priority, I think, is trade. China views trade as a cornerstone for strengthening the BRICS economy, so we're likely to see a further push for the expansion for intra-BRICS trade and the reduction of trade barriers. And then there is tech. Right, China is likely to leverage its expertise to foster innovation and digital transformation within the BRICS. And now this could mean rolling out initiatives to build a robust digital economy, step up cybersecurity cooperation, and ensure that tech advancements are shared far and wide, basically for the benefit of all member states. And then on climate change, within the BRICS, I think China is keen on ramping up cooperation in green technology and renewable energy projects that align with global sustainability goals. So if you look at China's investments in solar and wind energy initiatives in Brazil and in India, they're not only contributing to reducing carbon footprints, but also they're providing economic opportunities in these regions. So it's sort of a win-win strategy. It's really setting the stage for a greener and more prosperous future. And then to tackle global inequality, let's not forget that China may advocate for policy that promote inclusive growth, reduce poverty, and ensure that the benefits of economic development are equitably distributed. And this could involve supporting education and healthcare and social protection programs within BRICS nations. And Peter, with the inclusion of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, Iran, and Ethiopia, the 2024 BRICS Summit marks a significant expansion of the bloc. What new opportunities for collaboration and economic synergy does South Africa envision arising from this expansion? And conversely, what are the primary challenges that South Africa anticipates in integrating these new members? What kind of measures is the country taking to foster a cohesive and effective BRICS framework moving forward?
I think this is a difficult one, actually. I mean, on the one hand, for sure, including new members is great. For a long time, South Africa has kind of been seen as the African voice, which can sometimes be a plus, but also a negative in the sense that the other African countries, especially when you think about the size of Egypt, the size of Nigeria, that they would have to go through South Africa perhaps isn't quite fair. So to have these other voices coming in, and I would say that it's going to be important to make sure that in the future, countries like Nigeria do get included. Important that Egypt, these big economies that represent different parts of the continent are included. So having more voices makes the family bigger, and that gives, I think, the grouping more voice when it starts to sit on the global platform, when it starts to have conversations with the traditional West. So I think it's good. The integration, I think the challenges are going to be, I guess, making sure that nobody gets left behind, but also there will be challenges in terms of diplomacy, political issues, especially when you think about, yes, we want to move forward as a grouping, but we also function in a bigger world. And some of the members in there perhaps may not, how can I put this, may not easily be seen as natural partners for the West. And so we're going to be in a situation where we're going to have to defend our choices and at the same time understand the concerns that some of the other countries might have. But I think the overall story is going to be that the bigger and the more that we become, the greater our voice and easier it will become in terms of setting a new global agenda. So whatever challenges we might have in coming together, I think the benefits are going to far outweigh some of the challenges that we'll have. But certainly from an African perspective, I think the more the members that we get sooner, the better, so that we have, I think, proper regional representation of the entire continent. But I can ask the same sort of question to you. With the addition of these new members like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Ethiopia, how does China view this expansion of BRICS? What are the potential strategic and economic benefits that China sees from these partnerships? And I guess additionally, are these challenges that China anticipates in maintaining cohesion and unity within this new, larger, and more diverse group?
Peter, let me quote President Xi Jinping's words on this. He said that the BRICS expansion is historic and it's a new starting point for BRICS cooperation. So you see, for China, the expansion of BRICS is seen as a great boost to the bloc's global influence and economic diversity. I think we share a lot of similarities on a lot of the points. We share common ground on a lot of the fronts you just shared with us. Now, this expansion for China offers strategic benefits, allowing countries in the bloc to strengthen their diplomatic ties and foster economic collaboration in regions rich in investment opportunities and resources. For example, Saudi Arabia's entry brings significant oil reserves and investment potential, which could facilitate energy cooperation and trade partnerships beneficial for all member states. And the new members also bring significant economic potential with large markets and growing consumer bases. China anticipates that these partnerships could lead to increased trade, particularly in sectors where China has a competitive edge, such as technology, manufacturing, and infrastructure. But China is also aware that this increased diversity also presents challenges. With different political systems, economic structures, and developmental stages, maintaining cohesion within a larger BRICS becomes more complex, and China anticipates that divergent interests may lead to disagreements, particularly regarding economic policies and trade practices. So to address these challenges, Beijing is likely to emphasize the importance of open dialogue and consensus building among members, just ensure that all voices are heard and respected. Now, Peter, I want to get your take on the new payment system that we're talking about these days. There have been discussion about establishing a BRICS payment system to facilitate transactions among member countries. What are South Africa's considerations in evaluating its participation in such a system? How does South Africa perceive the potential impact of this system on the current global financial architecture?
So I think that the idea of the payment system certainly has been embraced by South Africa. Again, the challenges that we face, and many African countries, particularly the new ones, is that a lot of our debt is denominated in the US currency, and it has almost become a de facto currency for the continent. And so whilst within the BRICS system, for as long as there are members outside of BRICS, it's going to be a challenge for us just to use that as the BRICS payment system on its own. One hopes with continued expansion that there will be I think, a more gentle push towards alternatives and the embracing of a new payment system, new currency even perhaps, as the primary currency is going to take hold. But I suspect this is a project that's going to take a bit of time. It's certainly not going to be one that's going to happen immediately, given just how entrenched the current payment systems have been and are in African economies. And if South Africa was in isolation and could function on its own, it would be easy to switch. However, unfortunately, when you talk about South Africa, you must always think about the continent, especially now that we have the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which has become a priority for us to make sure that inter-Africa trade increases. And so perhaps there could be a way of embracing and bringing this new payment system into play. But I think it certainly is a move for the future, not the immediate term, but one that certainly South Africa, I think, embraces.
Thank you very much, Peter. Great to have you. Appreciate you taking the time talking to us. We really appreciate your time and your perspectives. Thank you.
Yan, it's been a great pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to future conversations with you.
Thank you. Likewise.